All right. Well, we're live here for the Peak Performance Podcast with Rick Roque and Michael Kelleher, our special guest for today, the founder of Adopt the Brand and a longtime industry figure here in mortgage, housing, and real estate. Welcome to the show, my friend. I love it.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me.
Yeah. The intent of the show itself is really to talk about like sort of production strategies and growth strategies and market trends and market strategies that really drive individuals to achieve peak performance was kind of the genesis of the show. And and I'm going state by state to kind of interview, top producers, performers, thought leaders in mortgage on how to best tackle the market today. And I thought of you for this one here because I started with Maine and Massachusetts and Rhode Island and in Connecticut. But what's interesting about you is you introduced this concept of like owning your own zip code, right? And this was probably a couple of years ago. So I genuinely think you were the first to probably brand that, and it was the first that I heard someone saying like, here's some strategies that you could use as a loan officer or as a mortgage company to really own the production opportunities in your backyard and potentially in other people's backyards. So I wanted to have you on the show because I immediately thought of you, in that regard. And so it was a perfect opportunity to introduce you to the Peak Performance audience.
Yeah, there's a lot of synergies. At Adopt the Brand Media, we have a long-running podcast, audio, that is very active in its listeners, and video. And it's only mortgage leaders. And we shifted to them telling them their story so that loan officers, when they're looking at what company to go to next, it's a more authentic way to see that leadership before you make the final decision. And you have all producers on the show. So I think it's a great resource as well for loan officers to see what the best blocking and tackling, what the best behaviors, attitude, techniques are to get to where they are. So I think we're both showcasing different milestones that other people that are not there yet can have a blueprint on how to get where they want, and they can navigate within. And in addition to the show, we have our Adopt the Brand Day, September 16th in Newport, Rhode Island. Happy to give a discount of $49.99 for any loan officer that wants to attend, versus I know sometimes those $800 price tags can be difficult to get in, and have them around others. So I appreciate you having me on the show. And I'll say, I came up with the Own Your Zip Code because I do consult with leaders in the industry. And my frustration is, after seeing all this technology, adoption's always an issue. And getting the most out of your vendor is always an issue. And I started to realize if they just focused on the zip code and started there and won their zip code in technology, in production, this is the best way to scale it out to the rest of the company. Versus,
what's interesting, and this is where I think your expertise in your role, while a bit counterintuitive to producers, is exactly right. Because so often production scale is a function of technology in your tech stack and what it is that's actually supporting your ability to grow and to sustainably grow month in, month out, year in, year out, right? If it's just the individual efforts of the individual loan officer, you get the peaks and valleys, sales performance that we're all accustomed to, and we've all sort of been there, done that. But it's always a function of the technology that supports our ability to sustainably show up, to make it happen. And in my view, you've done a great job in working with companies and especially retail platforms to really zone in on what their tech stack is and how they optimize more efficiently use it.
Yeah, you just see in professional sports, every team now has a strategy, a playbook, and they run analytics against it. And then they take the data in and they lean into that data. I mean, they've ruined sports in that manner, but this should be the same blueprint for lenders. So many decisions are made on technology and sales technology for their loan officers in a boardroom, but they're used in a zip code. So I was trying to create this North Star to align executives with the loan officers. And you need to start with a simple, it's like eating an elephant. You got to do it one bite at a time. And I say one zip code at a time. There's 42,000 zip codes. You can make a crushing on if you just won every zip code and worked your way up. So
I love that.
Because I know you were interested in is I was asked to speak at these sales summits for IMB lenders. And I wanted to tell them, after all my experience with podcasts, and I'm sure you can speak about it too, we all learn different pieces of it. I started to learn it's about the guests and the experience that occurs with the guests and the doors that open through the guests. And something starts to unlock when you focus on the guests and you focus less on the vanity metrics. If you are actually doing business to business or business to consumer referral partner sales, you can use it as a mechanism to grow. And the alarming piece was I had, and you'll see it in a slide, but I had them raise their hands, and 0 out of the 75 loan officers actually have a podcast alone, let alone in their zip code, that's longer than 5 episodes currently. So that's the easiest next step, the easiest piece to write a goal around. The easiest way to use AI today, I think, is you combine the data that we talked about, analytics of Redder, with having something to attract the people that you see on the Redder screen. And I think it's podcasts. It could be your own flavor, your own ingredients, but I think you have 2 people on here that have the 2 top shows in mortgage, or 2 of the top 4. And so hopefully we can give them some good advice, and you can beatbox with me and we can walk through.
One thing, and I'll bring up your presentation in a second. In a non-mortgage context, I suggest you follow. There's a guy named Senator Roque in Vermont. And it's a fellow who, I don't know if he was a state senator or not, but he calls himself Senator Roque in Vermont. And all he does is he goes from small delis, restaurants, businesses throughout the state of Vermont. And what he does is he brings hundreds of thousands of views from all around the world around these small little businesses in Vermont. And he's become really famous, both online as well as in the state of Vermont, because he kind of, there's one area code, at least there's more than one zip code, but there's one area code in Vermont, 802. And what's interesting about it is he brings all kinds of attention to these businesses that to an audience that otherwise would never run into these businesses, right? But the reciprocal response is these businesses become remarkably loyal to this individual because of the attention that he brings to them, right? And when I was looking at his stuff last night, and it reminded me of this concept of owning your zip code that you, I think, have championed really well. In that, if you are doing a podcast, for instance, and you add a little bit of production guidance by Adopt the Brand, for instance, on the videography, the lighting, the editing, that kind of thing, and then the overall strategies that a loan officer can employ to build relationships with builders and realtors and communities and different sort of stakeholders within that community. I think there's a real way of being able to really own that zip code, just like this guy, Senator Roque in Vermont, owns kind of Vermont.
I have a similar story for you. What would you say is the approximate average age of a loan officer right now?
I don't know, mid to late 40s, maybe 45, 46. I don't know.
And so that age might say it's too late to start a podcast. I actually think one of your superpowers.
What? I hope not.
No, I think my job is to tell you.
Say that. Go ahead.
You'll find in your area there's very few podcasts you're competing with. So
yeah. Oh, that's right.
But here's an advantage of being that age is there's 2 realtors out of Newburyport, Massachusetts, that really lean into the nostalgia. And I think people are fascinated with the rising prices in New England and in many places across the country. The way they talk about how these 2 streets used to have a pub and nobody wanted to live there, and they called it Slime Hood because it smelled or it looked like slime was going down, and now they're $1.1 million condos, and Susie grew up on that street. Or they'll talk about how this oceanfront restaurant is being taken down and they want to build 120 condos there. There's a lot of sexy stories about the nostalgia of a neighborhood, like you said, and people tune in all over the place because they feel it in their own area. And I think, again, that's possible through focusing on the zip code.
No, I love it. That's a good segue to your presentation here. So go ahead. So you want me to just advance it, or can you advance it?
Go to the slide, and then so I just found this fascinating. So the first market share strategy that was ever invented was the grocery store. So people walk down the aisle, and they're always have 7 no's before they give a yes. And so right now, what is very hot and popular in grocery stores is removing guilt. A peanut butter cup with 2 grams of sugar next to a Reese's peanut butter cup with 20 grams of sugar. Carb-free, sodium-free, grass-fed. And so I think I just try to say your zip code is your aisle. There's different aisles in the grocery store. When you're comparing yourself on a podcast, you need to understand what your aisle is in your zip code. And that's your only competition. And then just try to find something that removes guilt, removes fear around buying a home. That's where people are attracted to.
I love it. Okay. So I'm sure you'll tie that down to kind of a loan officer practice within a specific zip code, but you want me to go on to the next slide?
Yeah, you can either comment back or go on to any of these slides.
No. I mean, look, a buyer's strategy is really interesting in how merchants are able to sort of delineate that behavior or to segment out that behavior based on what is presented in front of them, right? But yeah, let's keep going through this. I like this. I like where you're heading with this.
So I think you have to start with what's easy. So just like a supermarket, you're probably not going to get into Kroger's or Stop and Shop. Same with when you first start a podcast, you'll see in a later slide, the key is to get to a certain amount of episodes. So make it easy on yourself and focus on the guests, get the local builder, get the football coach. And then long-term, this is where you want to use the Redder data so that you can see the influential selling agents, the influential buying agents, different data on what is working, what the trends are, but it should all be on this same theme. 1 out of 9 Americans influences the other 8. And so don't chase the 8. I always say one of your guests before Thanksgiving should be the football coach, especially if you're going to go to that football game, because there are so many people that aren't going to watch the full episode, but they're going to be aware you talk to coach.
Yeah. I like
that. It's not about a call to action in the podcast. It's about the 10 people that came up to you, maybe watched 30 seconds of it, said you had a great podcast. Those 10 people are starting conversations that could turn into mortgage business. They're starting conversations where they could be your next guest. Not to mention, that coach coaches a lot of parents or talks to a lot of parents, coaches a lot of kids. That is an influencer. And so I always say, find the one and start with it being easy. And then, Redder, I'm in Redder every day. Then Redder, once you have a year under your belt, you can start to go to these real estate agents that you can see are influencing. And you have the advantage of knowing your zip code. So you can dive deeper and know what streets they're selling homes on and really cater into, just keep zooming in and find out where people are influential.
Yeah, no, I love that. I do love that because it's almost like lighting a forest fire. You do it sort of one match at a time, or like sort of one area at a time. So you do it through that one individual at a time within a community, because that one individual, like to your point, that one individual will touch directly or indirectly 9, 10, 15, or 20 people who happen to see that episode. It's a really good point, because you and I will go to conferences, and it's how often do people come up to us and talk about, oh, I saw that particular episode, and more than likely they saw a segment of it and they liked what they saw, and they may have stopped, but they probably told 10 other people that they saw our episode and they liked what they saw, and it creates this sort of momentum, this social momentum.
Yeah, you nailed it. Plus, you don't now have to go up to that person. That person came up to you, and it's no different for us at a conference.
That's right.
Somebody that could need a cash out refinance, right? And work your way there.
That's right.
Brad Stevens, the coach, or now the GM of the Boston Celtics, asks these 3 questions. What do you want? What's
big
true?
Celtic fan. I'm just not a big Brad Stevens fan after you let Jalen go, but go ahead.
I love Jaylen Brown, man.
I know,
he's a
dude.
grinder
Like the
us.
kids were crying all over the streets of Boston. But go ahead.
He's a grinder. We speak to the Jaylen Brown fans because, you're born with the talent of Jason Tatum. My point is, if I had that amazing Jason Tatum talent, maybe I would have went to 100,000 subscribers right away. Instead, I am grinding and making it focused on the guests. So that's where, what do I want? I want the ability to reach executives in the mortgage industry. What's true? Leading with a sales pitch doesn't work. Asking them to showcase themselves works well. And how do you get there? They need to see social proof. They need to see other people that have been on the show. And so once you have it going too, then don't take your foot off the gas at any point. It will come back to bite you. Once you stop, it's hard to start again. Once you have a lapse in guests, they can sense it. But I think if you just write these 3 pieces and put it somewhere and make it specifically around owning your zip code, for me, around what that podcast would mean in your zip code, it's a great reference point to work on.
I love it.
This is when you're thinking of maybe where you want to start, or I'm not going to give you the speech on like who to be friends with, but I think when you have the podcast, the representation of what you want your podcast, this applies to it as well.
Yeah.
So maybe every 6 months, make sure the 5 people that you have on, and then you sprinkle in the rest, are a reflection of either where you are now or from the previous slide, where you want to be. You choose your future by who you spend time with today. You choose the future of your ability to own the podcast by who you bring on as a guest. And people enjoy the process. They enjoy the journey. So even when you go into this Redder data, you don't need to pick the most obvious, most influential, heavy hitter that you want on the show. It's authentic. People would appreciate the journey where you started with somebody small and you worked your way up. And also look at targets in Redder of real estate agents you want to work with, and look at the 5 people they hang around with. And if they're in your zip code, start with them as a guest and work your way to the end goal, which is that real estate agent doing 20, 30 deals a year.
I love it. No, I agree with that. I mean, and that's why I like to use the Redder data. I mean, everyone wants to talk to the number 1 realtor in that market, but sometimes you need to you need to earn that kind of audience, and you need to work your way into that audience. And sometimes I think all it takes is that one individual that is a top producer that does interview you, or you interview them, I should say. And then all of a sudden you're beginning to earn your way into that crowd.
Yeah. And on that theme, if you ask for your benefit, you sound selfish. You might not even say it verbally, but if you're asking for a huge guest right off the bat, they're going to believe it's about you. You're trying to get more views. You're trying to get their business. Self-entitlement kills the ask. They would appreciate a humble journey to match them. You tell somebody that you're going to feature them on the show and it's going to be good for them in the podcast. Don't assume that's a benefit for them. If they're older in age, this is the point people always say, can I get 15 minutes for a coffee? It's a lot different for a 65-year-old who has less time and appreciates time more than maybe a 30-year-old that doesn't think twice and is looking to meet for a coffee. So just ask what the benefit is so that you don't sound selfish when you do the ask.
Yeah, see, this is exactly, I didn't even know this is where this is heading, but that's exactly right. Earn the time before you ask for it, because I hate it when people are like, ring, Mike answers the phone and he's like, "Hey, Mike, how you doing? How's your day going today?" It's like, who the hell are you? Why do I need to talk to you? Why do I need to even answer that question? You haven't really deserved the right for me to answer that question. So like, why? What's going on? What do you need? It becomes extremely adversarial right from the get-go versus like the ring. So, "Hey, Mike, I've been watching your growth. You're incredibly impressive. I see your numbers. I use Redder. I have a property, or I'm really interested in growing this particular market, the Essex Junction, Vermont, or Marblehead, Massachusetts, because you're an expert in that market, I'd love to have a couple minutes of your time just to talk to you about it. All of a sudden, Michael's like, okay, I am an expert. This guy knows, he's done his research on who I am, and he just wants to pick my brain about X, Y, or Z. And all of a sudden, you're more inclined to be like, okay, yeah, well, what's going on? What do you need? But I love this slide. This is a perfect slide.
Yeah, I can't say, if you just go to the previous one, just from a blocking and tackling perspective, researching the person increases the likelihood they'll come on the show. They are going to make assumptions. If you show them what the questions are going to be, give them a chance to maybe modify the questions, show them the purpose from what you just described, show them you did a little research, show them why they're the star. And I'll add this part for loan officers out there. Whether you do the work yourself or you hire a contractor, and I'm happy to meet as many calls as I can handle, but once you have the output, so over the years, I've had these questions and I've had to go scour the internet and watch YouTube videos and do research. And sometimes it's a little overwhelming. I've now taken the outputs of the last 15 question formats that I did from all that research and where I went, and I've now created an agent in Claude. So when I just put the link in, it asks the questions or comes up with a question format pretty similar to when I spend 2 hours doing it. And so if you exported a file out of Redder and added that to it, it would be difficult for it to perfect it at first. But if you do the work yourself for 5 episodes and then show the output and the input, it will automate it. Same thing with my newsletter. I don't trust the AI to do it right away, but I had over 2 years worth of newsletters. And when I was able to show the newsletters, which I used a contractor, I was then able to go from contractor to Claude because it wrote the same output.
Yeah. So
I think researching a person and showing them value after, and that is important. I'm sure there's examples in the zip code beyond a podcast you could do as well. Lunch and learns with a real estate agent, great ideas where they get their face on the flyers. It's just a lot easier to make somebody a star these days with AI.
I love it. Yeah. One of these days we definitely need to sit down next to each other, because I'd love to understand. I'd love to share with you, quite frankly, some of the things I use, some of my Claude agents, and some of the tools I use within Claude. But I'd love to also see what you do as well. We can compare some notes. So what was your intent here with the piano as 88 keys? Most people use 14.
Yeah. So most songs are actually only on 14 keys, but there's 88 keys to a piano. And people, when they have podcasts, feel like they have to keep their same voice or their same attitude. And it's very authentic to be yourself. If you are afraid to make jokes, like don't be afraid to make jokes on the podcast. Yeah. If you laugh and snort, don't be afraid to laugh. Just be yourself and
maybe not snort.
Don't try and stay in the same 14 key lane that everybody else is going
to. I do like that. It's like use the full range of who you are versus just one sterile perspective, because otherwise you get a more three-dimensional view of that authentic self of that individual. I love that.
So knowledge brings satisfaction, application brings fulfillment.
Yeah.
I just love this slide too. If you read a book, you watch this podcast, and then you go to the Adopt the Brand Day in Newport, and you hear these ideas on how loan officers can build bigger books of business.
Yeah.
That increases your acknowledgement, and that's satisfaction. But at the end of the day, you wake up again, you go on Redder, and you try and find that real estate agent you're trying to do a deal with, and you cold call them or try to do a lunch and learn. Application is fulfillment. If you hit that record episode and you interview the person who runs the VFW, and it's done and it's there, and you're out in the community, you're at the Veterans Day memorial service and people are referencing the podcast, you'll have this sense of fulfillment. Even when you finish and you hit publish, you have accomplished something that when you wake up tomorrow, you still have that podcast. And then when you get a habit out of it, you get fulfillment of knowing that you were able to start and stick to it. So only practice leads to improvement. Over studying just leads to a satisfaction that's not going to increase your zip code market share.
I love it.
This is just, you could almost talk about this slide about going through being a podcast host and always worrying about how your hair looks or your voice looks. The listener, the person watching it, doesn't really care about you. They care about what they're getting out of the show. That's why they chose to listen to it. They're probably doing a million things while they're watching it. This is just a rip the Band-Aid message to you to don't not hit record. Don't not start a podcast because you're worried about what the audience is going to think of you. They don't have time to think of you. They're too busy during their day.
I love that. Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think the focus is really making it about the audience and what you can extract with what you can contribute and what I can extract from Michael for the benefit of the audience. But yeah, I agree with you. So get out of your comfort zone and collect evidence yourself. What did you think about that?
I love on the pod. I mean, this applies to anything that you're going to do in sales. When you get out of that comfort zone, out of that box, all the sales happen outside. There's that famous diagram of the box and then the circle outside of it and says all sales happen here when you get uncomfortable. But for a podcast, there's such a more obvious roadmap. So 10% of the world makes it to 5 episodes. And 10% of that makes it to 21 episodes.
Yeah.
So if you make it to 21, you're in the 1% of the world right now that actually has a podcast. I can't even imagine what the percentage is in your zip code. And when I went and asked 75 loan officers, not one was even at 5. And that's where the fear breaks.
Let me stop you right there. I will tell you probably most zip codes don't have a podcast, right? And the reality is people want to be the next Joe Rogan. People want to have these, and they create this massive agenda where they try to be sort of all things for all people, for all markets, all topics, all subjects, and it lacks specificity. And as a result of it lacking sort of focus and specificity, you lack sort of application. You lack people identifying with it. You know, I think you sort of start small. It's almost like the Sean Ryan show. He started small. He started with like experiences of people who've been deployed overseas. Tell your story, right? That was his nut. That was his specific focus. And then he expanded from there to politics and religion and different things. But I think that's the one area people, you know, they and kind of your niche is your zip code. Because you know what? Essex Junction, Vermont is not a heck of a lot different than most, you know, suburban towns of 5,000 or 6,000 people around the country or 7,000 people around the country. So so if you focus on issues that are in your local zip code, more than likely you're going to get a lot of people from other zip codes that are going to identify with it.
I don't even know of a loan officer that has an office in my zip code. So they certainly don't have a podcast or I would know it. I'll spin it back on you here because I love the two-way conversations. You had a very consistent show. You know, you do it every Friday. What would be your advice? How did you get, what was it, the feeling going into the 5th episode? How did you get to 21? And if you were a loan officer doing it, do you think you would do it yourself or would you team up with a branch? I do think
it's helpful having, you know, 1 or 2 people to do it with you. And I think that I think I lost a little momentum when Brock and Jeremy went on to other shows, quite frankly. But I do think that there's something fresh about having sort of an interactive dialogue with a few other people. Now, that could be guests. That could be, it doesn't have to be sort of, anchor personalities for the show itself. So if I'm a loan officer, I think your comments on the market and what you do a day in the life of a loan officer, for instance, and what your focus is in each week, I think is one angle. Interviewing builders, interviewing realtors, interviewing home inspectors, interviewing appraisers, like anyone that's connected to housing in your local zip code, I would have on the show. Right. And you only have to do it maybe once a week. You don't have to do it every single day. Just do it once a week because people begin to notice, and then of course, storing it in YouTube and pushing it on Facebook and so on, I think really does help because, as young as audiences are migrating away from Facebook, home buyers are on Facebook and home buyers on Instagram, and B2B other businesses, they're on LinkedIn. So I would touch those three platforms. And then of course, YouTube as well. YouTube is really phenomenal. There's individual loan officers that some of the top VA loan officers in the country do, like, VA shows on YouTube. So YouTube shorts and YouTube interviews, long form interviews, are really growing in popularity for sure. And I have not touched YouTube. I mean, I post on YouTube, but I don't really exploit YouTube as much as I should. So I have a lot of room for improvement. But I would say certainly after 5 episodes, you start getting into a groove. After 6 or 12 months, you get into a groove where you're like, well, I'm in a streak here and I don't want to break it.
Exactly.
So you just keep going.
And here's a big takeaway for people listening, because everybody starts at this point. Say you do team up with a branch. You care so much about the ownership of the show because you believe it's going to go to all these views and then who controls it. And so then you never hit record, you never start. Because I focus on the guests and focus on how Rick just described how to become more influential in your zip code. For me, look at this slide. Even if I team up with somebody, they are never going to be, the chances there, 1%, they're consistent enough to stick with it is so low that as long as your face is on the show, and it can feel like they're going with you for 6 months, but at some point they're going to quit and you're going to keep being the face of the show. So if you focus on the guests, not to mention, though, I think the one part you do want to make sure you grab is the transcript of the show and get it onto a website that you own as well. Your partner can do it as well. Financial searches in LLM models are up 60% this year by customers looking for items like homes. LLMs are looking for long form specific text.
And where do you upload those? So they're accessible.
Upload it
on a website?
Yeah, I would create just a newsletter landing page on my own domain that just makes sure that I copy the transcript out of YouTube, download the transcript out of StreamYard, throw it into a Claude. Happy to teach that, but that's super simple. Yeah. And if somebody's talking in the town about how they were running into zoning problems with the historic district on a second lien, when people do search,
that'll get found.
Yeah, like how do I present to the historic district? All of a sudden, your results are going to come up there. So I think that's an important takeaway. I mean, it's a tactical takeaway, but it's also don't let ego get in the way. Like, work hard, Jaylen Brown, and outwork them, and you will win the title in your zip code.
I do love, and I think this is all sort of coming together because I think that this kind of gets to the strategy around organizing who your, both who your audience is, who your guests are, and who you are as the podcaster. I love how you've organized this because I think it's very smart, and I think it's a way of focusing. It's all the precursors of what you need to do before actually doing your first podcast to kind of establish what your focal point is and what your strategy is going into the podcast itself. I love this.
Yeah, I always think eyeballs is the number one commodity that nobody in mortgage looks at. And I think for loan officers, rather than creating a digital home search landing page, podcasts are easier to drive them to. And the results are pretty easy to be in the number 1%. I don't think there's anything easier.
I love this. This is a great slide.
And then you can use Redder to like distribute it, right? Like export. And then, I mean, you can't reach out to consumers, but you can reach out to B2B.
And the B2B piece is what we do, right? As far as, because that's where we get the majority of our referrals. But there's no question that there's a way of kind of maybe straddling that fence and doing both. Find the 17260. Yeah.
This slide is just like, look, Gary Vee is great. I listen to Gary Vee. Listen to him to motivate you, like drinking a coffee. But
of course.
But when you're coming up with your plan for your guests, in my case, or however you're going to do your podcast, look at the people with 100 views on theirs. Don't look at the people with 1 million. You are so many steps away. It's not pragmatic. Work your way till you pass them, and then find that next milestone. I love that. That's a very important piece.
Podcast is the vehicle, not the goal. Build your top 5. You become who you spend time with. I love that. Stack your skills and kill the misdirection. I love that summary slide. I think that's fantastic. I think that there's no question you're really on to something by way of helping others build their own audiences and their own podcasts, but you need to have the vehicle to do it first. You need a bus. You might start off with a four-seater sedan, and then you go to a minivan, and then you go to a mini bus, and you go to a bus. The point is, you need a vehicle initially to start with. Otherwise you're just not. You're kind of getting ahead of yourself. You know what I mean? You want an arena of people listening to you, but you simply don't have the vehicle to get you there.
And I think with data and the increase of non-QM loans over the last 2 years, and the ability for lenders now to not have to broker out HELOCs or partner up with a company that can give a HELOC in 10 minutes, there are so many more opportunities in your zip code to bring value to referral partners, contractors that need to get paid.
I love it.
Builders, investors that want to fix and flip, even knowing the property and going through different properties that everybody's searching with the same FHA conventional, and maybe showcasing that and telling them how, with a guest, I focus on guests, but work with the guest on how to improve the property, turn it into a rental unit.
To your point, in almost every zip code, outside of maybe the public school district, the largest employer or employers directly or indirectly support home ownership. Whether it's your Lowe's, your Home Depots, your lawn guys, just your home and gardens, your realtors, your builders, your loan officers, roughly 18-19% of the GDP nationwide is connected to housing in some way. So owning your own zip code makes a lot of sense. I love it. I appreciate you being on the show today. This is phenomenal. Michael Kelleher, I think you're not just onto something, but I love how you formulated this. And I look forward to helping you build this out even more so, and then helping loan officers and realtors. I think this is even more as applicable or more so to realtors, quite frankly. So I love seeing where you go with this, and I appreciate having you on the show.
I appreciate you, Rick. I appreciate Redder. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Michael.